Hello, Smith, Ajayji, Mr.
Right.
Pandey. All of our speakers are already here. So we are sharp at 9. Paroma, I think can start the introduction. Let people join in. So by that time, introduction, other things will go on. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Welcome to the global webinar on cyber defense. This webinar has been titled The Endless War, and rightfully so. I'm sure you will admit to the fact that cyber threats have become a burning pain point for everyone across the globe. We are not only losing more than $17,000 to phishing attacks every minute, but each data breach to a US enterprise costs an average of $392 million as per third party survey data. In addition to this, 60% of the businesses that experience a ransomware attack file bankruptcy within 6 months. Some burning questions today with the CISOs worldwide are: how can enterprises maintain security amidst rapidly changing infrastructures? What are the challenges and opportunities of cybersecurity? And how can enterprises fortify their cyber posture and build cyber resilience? We will carry forward this discussion in just a while. Now, I will take the privilege to introduce the eminent speakers of today's panel discussion. Let me first introduce Mr. Shekhar Pandey from Seceon. Shekhar Pandey is an expert in data center architecture and highly scalable network solutions, and is proven leader with more than 20 years of experience developing and marketing innovative technology solutions. Before founding Seceon in 2014, Mr. Pandey was General Manager and Vice President of Platform Solutions at BTI Systems. Prior to this role at BTI, Mr. Pandey held numerous senior leadership roles at Juniper Networks, Internet Photonics, Lucent, and 3Com, now HP. As Seceon CEO, he works closely with customers to define and address the problems, implications, consequences, and solutions of defending corporate assets in today's highly connected enterprise. Mr. Pandey holds multiple patents in application virtualization, highly scalable data center architecture, scalable multicast distribution, and power optimization for higher performance. With this, let me invite Mr. Pandey to our discussion. Now, let me introduce Mr. Smith Gonsalves to our discussion. Smith Gonsalves is India's youngest cybersecurity evangelist, information security professional, certified ethical hacker, forensics investigator, and security analyst with immense domain experience. He's an expert in web application security, network security, application security, deep web, zero net, risk, and advisory. He's also actively working with law enforcement agencies on cybercrime and cyber investigation cases. He's an active member in Indian information security community. Dear Mr. Smith, welcome to today's panel discussion. Our third speaker is Mr. Ajay Srivastava. Ajay is a principal consultant and trainer par excellence with over 3,500 hours of trainings to his credit on best practice standards across continents. He has over 33 years industry experience and has held senior management positions with companies like Philips, GE, Sanyo, BSI, etc. He has been working in the field of management and management systems since 2000. He has a successful track record of nearly 2 decades of designing, developing, documenting, and implementing management systems based on various ISO and ISO ISEC standards, leading to their certification by accredited certification bodies in the first instance. He has helped businesses worldwide across geographies and industry sectors using these standards and frameworks to develop competent and efficient organizations and help them to meet their strategic goals. Mr. Ajay Srivastava, welcome to today's panel discussion. Now, Last but not the least, let me introduce the moderator of today's panel discussion, Mr. Sushobhan Mukherjee, Chairman InfoSec Foundation, CEO Prime InfoServe LLP. I will request Mr. Sushobhan Mukherjee to please take over and moderate this panel discussion. Sir, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paroma, for the introduction. So, warm welcome to today's session, our eminent panelists and our distinguished guests. So, as I have to moderate the panel, already the context was set. As Paroma was saying, I think all of you can very well understand situations are very scary. So, it is already we are into a lot of doubts because though we are into the era of digital transformation, digital has become an interface for our business now. So cybersecurity is no longer is a kind of optional thing. It has become a necessary aspects in our day-to-day business. But still, as you can understand, so we are all well aware about the term of VUCA, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and so those kind of situations are still prevailing in this market because we are into the dilemma. Like so much of cybersecurity technologies, products, services, even after that, based of the best products or technology companies, they are getting breached. Because last few months we have seen there are a lot of incidents across the globe. Latest one was in US itself, that MS Exchange kind of a breach, and through which lot of ransomware and lot of things are getting propagated. So users, customers, enterprises are in dilemma. So if this kind of large organizations, their product, their solutions can get breached, because MS Exchange was not alone. There was SolarWinds kind of a breach. There was a supply chain kind of attacks. There was passwords got leaked for Gmail and Hotmail kind of stuff. So I think the audience here, there everyone is in kind of a doubt that today's session, the way we have designed, it is not about to make you scary. So agenda of today's discussion with the eminent panelists to find out solutions. So let us not get scared and find out possible solutions, how still we can defend ourselves, have proactive measures, and create certain kind of best practices which we can implement in our day-to-day life. So from this perspective, first I'll come to Mr. Shekhar Pandey, because you come from a background of a Seceon, which is one of the renowned organization with SIEM and SOAR kind of platform. So if you can elaborate with your experience to our audience, how with this kind of SIEM and SOAR kind of platforms and technology, users and enterprises can get assistance to have protection against this kind of breaches. So over to you, sir. I think you are muted. If you need to unmute yourself and then you can talk. No, still you are muted. You need to unmute yourself. So these are few little technological glitches. So sometimes happens in
Is
Google
anybody
Meet
is
apps.
able to hear me now?
Yeah, now it's better. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, is that somebody? Okay.
Your screen was coming, but now it has gone. So yeah, now it's good.
I'm going to.
Your voice is little lower. I don't know. So it is coming very thin.
Is it better now? Are you able to
Yeah,
hear
it's far better.
me?
Far better.
Okay. So as Sushovan was pointing out, if you look into currently, and even it's like last, like let's say in the last 4 or 5 years, some of the threats are not what they used to be before, because what was happening earlier is you kind of had the delivery of the threat was happening through a single vectors. Now, if you look into the threats are being delivered, because the threat actors have also started using all set of the tools we use for like AI, ML, and automations and all that. The threat actors have also automated those threats. So if you look into, as Shushovan had mentioned about whether you are looking into the breaches where ransomware have been kind of like going around at pretty much at the their will and exposing the organizations, and then they are just like don't have any choices but to pay. So if you remember ransomware a few years back, it started with they were just encrypting the file and all that, and then you have to pay and you give them some kind of like bitcoins, and then you get your decryption key and all that. And then at that time, people were saying, oh, I have a backup, I will restore from the backup. Those attackers become smart. Now your backup is also kind of getting cut off and all that. You are not able to restore it. Also, they are exfiltrating the data. So that way they can breach, not only kind of like have breached you, taken the data, but they have made you pretty much not able to use whatever you got in there as well. So you are encrypted. And then now they can do the blackmailing and all that. So any of these attacks, what is happening is it's not happening with the single vectors and single steps. There are multiple steps involved. And the first step is always to breach a particular organizations with somebody's account, then escalate the account, drop like a malware, set up a command and control, collect the information, first learn about the organizations, get your critical assets and all that. Same thing as if you look into any of these like vulnerability exploits, where Shushovan had mentioned about like Microsoft, that's the new one with the exchange. But even if you look into the Sandburst, in Sandburst, what has happened is like, okay, something got embedded into your like a supply chain, but then it got distributed across all the organization. But those organizations who got breached with that, they did not had a good solution to detect those threats. Because there, if you look into the cybersecurity in the broad sense, if you look, there is a lot of experts into this panel, and some of you are joining, you are pretty much into the industry as well. So you understand the cybersecurity have two major kind of domain. So one domain is your cyber hygiene, and that is where basically you have your firewall, your identity management, your gateways, email gateway, web gateways, proxy, some firewall. And these tools always works based on the rule, signature, and policy. As long as those three things get satisfied, either you allow or deny. Then there are certain things which kind of get around these things or get through it because you don't have a rule or signature for it. And that is very common these days because a single malware somebody can take today and they can create thousands of its variation files, which you may not have the signature for yet. And it's like how quickly you can generate the signatures, you cannot keep up with those. So you always have to assume, and this is nothing new I'm talking about, that things will get through your hygiene, but that doesn't mean that you should not have the hygiene, because hygiene is your first kind of like what you call as the preventions, which you want to make sure nothing kind of easily get through, or mundane things which have been already known, you don't want them to get through. And then the second domain comes in, that is where basically you have continuous real-time monitoring. You have to proactively detect the threats and stop them before they cause a kind of a breach in your organization. And your goal is to cut those into the early steps, early stages. So any of these ransomware attack or any spying attack, you want to make sure when they are trying to compromise the credential or do the discovery recon in your organization, do the lateral movements to know exactly what is in there, trying to collect the information. Know those things at that point and cut them off. If you are able to do it, the hygiene system, that's good, but just assume that things will get through your hygienes one way or other way in there. And then it comes down to not only detecting it, but you have to stop it. And stopping also means you have to keep on enhancing your cyber hygiene. So make it kind of like your security postures keeps on getting better and better each and every day. So what you are doing is a two-way street. You are listening to these ones and keep those into the context of your real-time monitoring, proactive detection and stopping part. But at the same time, you are giving back to them, applying the policies on the devices on the hygiene sites to keep on making your hygiene better and better, and that way continuously keep on improving your cybersecurity posture. So just to give you an idea, it's like when you are looking at the organization, and if you try to say that, okay, I'm going to have multiple different silos in there, I will have a IDS product, I will have a SIM product, I will have a user entity behavior and analytics, I will have network behavior and analytics, I will have some threat intelligence, I will have security orchestrations and all that in there. If you try to do too many products into your environment, and if you look into some of the big companies, they have 200 products and they get breached and they don't even know about it. Most of the time they hear from the outside. And the reason is very simple, because if you have too many things to look at it, they are creating their own noise, and you are not able to kind of make a decision what I have to do. So you are pretty much paralyzed in that cases, like what I'm going to do. You are lucky sometimes you find here and there, but in general, on the big pictures, you are not any better secure than somebody who have probably maybe one or two products in there. So industry has been broken. If you look into for the last many years on the detection side, even those, the big company you will hear, Microsoft, they are talking about that, hey, they had like 1,000 people looking into our code and all that. Basically what the Microsoft is saying is that their detection didn't work. And same thing, many other companies as well. And it is really critical that if you want to have a better detections, you have to have a solution which is working in the real time, looking into all the events, activities which are happening, any movements which are laterals or whatever is happening in the organizations, whether the organization has its stuff on a data center, in the cloud, even the partner access in there, or remote workforce, everything you have to bring into the single context and discover that what is the interactions happening in the real time, detect the threats and stop it before it becomes too damaging in there. So comprehensive real-time visibility, proactive threat detections, stopping of the threats, whether you do automated or you do with the push buttons in there, and then basically all your compliance, analytics, reporting, and all those comes in there. But key is to stop those threats into the early stages. Without that, there will be always a struggle and always will be complaint that, hey, I'm not able to do it and I need more and more resources. And the resources is not only things which is going to solve your problem. What is going to solve the problem is doing the right thing at the right time and having a comprehensive view across the whole organization, not just like a point view, because the point view is always going to keep you busy dealing with the noise. Thanks, Susobanji. Any additional questions you have?
Yeah, I'll have. So I'll come back to you because few interesting pointers came to from your discussion. One is you highlighted that threats are also evolving. So we are now dealing with signatureless attacks. And also you are saying we need to have the visibility proactively way before the actual breach and other things happens. In that context, the question comes to my mind and maybe the audience mind, like, so in those situations, since threats are evolving, technology needs to evolve as well. Old legacy kind of tools, technology might not be useful always. But however, I'll come to with that question to you. Before let me run through one round with the other panelists also. So I'll come back to you. So from the discussion, Mr. Pandey said he talked about more of a proactive defense, incident response, detection in early, and then take the analytics and proactive measures. From that angle, I'll come to Smith to you. So on the contrary, we are hearing a lot of things about offensive security. We are hearing about a lot of new jargons like red teaming and all. So what exactly these are and how this will be useful for the enterprises?
Sure. So, first of all, thanks a lot for inviting me for this esteemed panel discussion. So, very important point, Sushobham sir, you have made, and in fact, various points covered by Chandra sir. So, a couple of things I would like to talk about the red teaming part. So, as Chandra sir was talking about about the monitoring part particularly, and the intrusion detections, about the one the indicator of compromise that are being getting detected and that are being getting unnoticed in the infrastructures of enterprise, and then enterprise has to pay different amount of burden on them. So, can there be a situation through which enterprise at the early stage know rightly where exactly are the security loopholes in their infrastructure? And if those loopholes are being pinpointed to the enterprise, can they have the capability to ensure that that particular loophole has a rightful monitoring capability being in place, or there are some security solution and certain products through which that particular vulnerability can be mitigated? So, well, exactly this is what exactly red teaming is all about from an enterprise level expectation. So when we talk about a red teaming activity, or we talk about why actually organization needs to conduct an offensive security assessment, the answer is very simple. Enterprise are going to suffer different sort of attacks coming from nation state hackers to different sort of attackers and black hat hackers. And in order to be prepared, in order to know from where exactly the attack is going to come in, what kind of vulnerabilities are they going to precisely target, and what I am going to lose in particularly. That means, what is my data on the table? Is my access on the table? Is my business on the table? So, well, exactly, red teaming activity helps you to identify all these critical security loopholes. And red teaming activity's main modus operandi is very simple: that you give a complete freedom to the enterprise, to the consulting team, to come in, penetrate their infrastructure through the means modern techniques used by the attackers and hackers with the use of social engineering. That means we have no limits. We can do a spear phishing attack. We can do an homographic attack based on domain squatting techniques. And we can send some mails. We can maybe look for some public facing endpoints for vulnerabilities, for CVE based vulnerabilities. Sometimes we can try to impersonate or speak with certain CXOs and get access to their systems, to get access to what exactly are they doing. We can look for some dark web based credential leaks to get in and see what are the credentials that are being affected of this organization. Can I try to use certain credentials? So all these activities, red teaming activity particularly depends upon organization expectation, what majorly the organization is focusing on. So there are external based red teaming activities, and there are internal based red teaming activities. So we can call them post breach scenario assessment, where you consider that you are breached and just see what kind of devastation that an attacker can take up when he gets the access of an infrastructure, what all kind of pivoting, what all kind of command and controls, and the kind of critical data that he can leak out. So red teaming is all about identifying the security vulnerability in the infrastructure. But if you ask me, is red teaming should be done by organization effectively, and how frequently it needs to be done, or is the red teaming the first thing to be doing from an offensive security assessment point of view? Well, my answer will be that the enterprise will have to get a VAPT, a vulnerability assessment, and a penetration testing done. And apart from VAPT, different sort of configurational reviews, the hardening of the application or the image source code reviewing, all this needs to be done at an early stage. Once the organization comes on to a maturity of being resilient enough, they can move forward, and they can certainly ensure that this kind of red teaming sort of activities can be done. So what do you, Sushobham?
So one additional addendum question to the red teaming activity. Apart from red teaming, you also keep on hearing blue teaming activity as well. And also there is a mindset, because always, as Mr. Pandey said about cyber hygiene, so cyber security is a kind of culture. But if once you go to the customers, all of us have seen, customer always say, you do a PT in my network without any destructive things. So my network, my bandwidth should not get choked, my server should not get affected. In this kind of situation, how do you think offensive this security will be useful, and how would you suggest users to mitigate the outcome of the offensive security kind of testing and all?
Sure. So, well, a very good question and relevant question raised by Shubham sir. And maximum enterprise that we particularly work in have seen that their first line item in the assessment or the objective that is being clearly defined to the enterprise, that is, if we are doing a penetration testing on production environment, make sure that the application or the infrastructure is not affected. Make sure that it is not down. So whenever any security company, consulting company does a pen testing or does any sort of offensive activity on the production servers or production site, particularly production infrastructure, it is very, very important, very clear that it would be fine if you take maximum time to identify vulnerabilities, but it won't be at all fine to identify vulnerabilities aggressively, which can cause the application to be getting down. And maximum pen testers do this mistake. And when this mistake is being done, the entire infrastructure bears the loss. The problem is when you run different sort of scripts, when suppose an nmap script, or suppose there is an IP where you are getting the ports being filtered, then the second step that the attacker does it, he tries to send a different packet. Maybe he pushes a fin flag, maybe then he string pack, then a fin packet, then an acknowledgement flag. And when this kind of flags have been pushed in, and the kind of rate limit that is being defined, there is a chance that the server can also drop. There is a chance that the server can fail to respond if he is internally connected or an external. And that time, that server would be very, very responsible to bear the business continuity of the infrastructure. And in that scenario, if that particular application collapses, the entire business downtime is getting affected. So there is no business downtime that is defined by the enterprise during assessment. And if at all there is a sudden downtime, the organization bears the loss, and that loss is being set onto the consulting firm. So very, very important that whenever you are doing a sort of activity of penetration testing on production system, it is very important that you do it passively. You don't go ahead and identify active security vulnerabilities. What do I mean by that? We do fuzzing on the IPs or the applications that we have. So if we do some fuzzing, if we enroll certain payloads onto the functions, input functions or certain fields, there is a chance that these payloads will be persistent on the production IP. So whenever a new person visits that application, that particular application will have those reflected caches being there. So it would be advised that such scenarios should be avoided. In fact, I may push organizations that there should be a UAT instance for doing such kind of activities in some scenarios where application specific is being required. But when you do an infrastructure penetration testing, it is certainly it needs to be done on your it needs to be done on the production systems. But the only ensurety that the attacker should be taking up is that they should ensure that the application or the server or the IP is not getting down. That's the topmost responsibility that needs to be taken, and the entire team needs to be synchronized. So when this kind of activity is being done, the challenge is not only on the consulting team, but it is very important that enterprise also push forward and check what exactly are this consulting team doing. So it's very important that enterprise have a daily, weekly call with these people and see which tools are they going to run in. Give them a walkthrough, give them some clear defined instructions in order to ensure that this kind of loss is not being taken up or bared particularly. So this is what I will have to put from my viewpoint, sir.
Thank you, Smith. But nature has thought is something differently. COVID-19 has taught us, because it is like almost 1 year we passed that lockdown and other phases. So COVID-19 forced us to go some kind of disastrous kind of situations where the businesses had to go back and face the situation completely unplanned way. Like suddenly it was kind of a lockdown, so people are having no clue how to run their business, how to maintain their operations, even from a work from home kind of mode, what will be the BYD kind of situations. So this was a complete kind of no preparation. So from this situation, we keep on hearing a lot of buzz regarding BCP, business continuity, and specific ISO standard and all. So since we have now talked about technology, I will come to little bit of process also, specifically on the business continuity, disaster recovery, this kind of situations. So I'll come to Ajay ji. So what do you think? So how BCP and this kind of standard and best practices can help enterprises to sustain in this kind of disastrous situations?
Hello to everyone.
Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yeah, absolutely, sir.
Okay. I have a very small anecdote to relate before I answer your question. I was sitting with a customer who was the owner and business of a very large fintech enterprise a couple of days ago. And he made a very, I would say, curt kind of remark, which said, the IT people, the technology guys, have no understanding of the business. I paused and thought about it, and I have been thinking about it. The theme of this webinar is the endless war, build your cyber defense. Cyber defense against a plethora of things. Everyone has spoken, Pandey sir has pointed out, Smith has, pointed out on a whole lot of technological issues. And the theme is endless. We know attacks will, increase not only in sophistication rapidly. So what does a guy do? How does one think about all of this? And that is where I think that it's very, very important for all of us to go back to fundamental principles. The specific question that Sushoban asked was with reference to ISO standards and one particular standard which is, in a family of standards, ISO 22301. Now, they all belong to a category which is called a management system standard. And a management system standard, to my mind, does simply a few things. It helps any organization proactively manage aspects, whether they pertain to quality, to information security, to business continuity, to environment. Today ISO certification carries a certain amount of marketing advantages, but do they really help? It all, in my mind, depends on how serious an organization is about practicing those. Today we are talking of 2 points I would like to make here. We do never talk the language of business. So we talk technology, those who are technical, and the business people do not understand a lot of the words. They're not even familiar. I mean, I imagine what Smith was saying, blue team, red team, who the hell, we see who will understand all of that. The challenge for all of us who are in this space is to build and educate the board level, the management. They're all aware today, it's a buzzword, cybersecurity, but believe you me, in my 2 decades at the senior management level in various interactions, it is purely lip service, not because the commitment is missing. In the large mass of people that are there at the top who drive the businesses, they have no clue as to what is the real life challenges, because their team members are not able to translate it for them in a language which they can understand. Now, a management system standard helps do that. At the very basic level, what does it say? Plan, do, check, and act. It's a virtuous cycle. Every ISO standard framework follows. Now, in the specific context and the question that Sushoban asked, business continuity, preparing for the unexpected. Now, the COVID pandemic scenario, no one had anticipated. I was delivering consulting to a client in the US in 2020. just when the lockdown had begun, March, and they had a scenario of pandemic. They actually used the word pandemic. But, I really don't think so, that they had thought through the impact and the seriousness. 2020, 21, normalcy will probably return in 2022. So we don't know when it will happen. Now, how can a business plan for such kind of unanticipated events? Uh, no one can foresee, but if we don't plan, as the saying goes, then we are bound to fail. Without a plan, plans may not follow the exact what we have done. And a standard like 22301, if implemented seriously by an organization, will prepare, because you are preparing against multiple scenarios, multiple situations. And you do have the business impact analysis, which is a mandatory thing, followed by a risk assessment and a risk management plan and a continuity plan. I do not want to, complicate or confuse everyone with the details about it. But please understand, these standards, if implemented in the right and true spirit, can help any enterprise, because it's not a one-time activity. It's a continual series of steps that one can do. Thank you, Sushovan. I hope I have been able to address some of your questions.
Yeah.
Part of the question.
Yeah, sure. So Ajay will come back. So from here, as you have rightly pointed about the term risks. So now, since today's topic is endless war, so all of us keep on talking. The next world war can be with cybersecurity only, because as we know, all our critical sectors are now connected. So power grid, they are connected. Entire banking, BFSI, telecom, everything is now connected, and we can see a lot of targeted attacks are also happening to against the national critical infrastructure. Recently, we have heard in India also, like power grid and a lot of things are in Mumbai. It was getting targeted. From this angle, I'll come to Mr. Pandey once again, because earlier we talked about that threats are evolving, signatureless kind of attacks. Now it is being seen, it is being targeted to the national critical infrastructure. How the tools like yours, which is kind of a next generation kind of technology, can help to prevent this kind of national critical infrastructure kind of situation compared to the legacy kind of tools?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing I'd like to point out, because if you are looking into the ICS part of the infrastructure, so first thing is like we always kind of like suggest, and same thing is like even the NIST had been suggesting it for a longer period of time. There has been many attacks, which some are very famous, on the critical infrastructure, ICS part of the infrastructure, whether it was Stuxnet, or you had Ukraine power utility attack, or even in Australia, you had few attacks on the sewer systems and all that. If you look into NIST has been always talking about that you got to have a separation between your IT and ICS part of the infrastructure. And then same time, the security monitoring for your ICS part of the infrastructure has to be architected in different way altogether. And then you should not have EG in and out. And we do understand a lot of critical infrastructures, or even security organizations, especially when we're talking about that, Army, Navy, and military and all those ones, they have their way to separate. Sometimes you'll hear these words, air gap network and all that in there. So it is really critical that first of all, for any of these infrastructures, where you have a critical infrastructures like power utility, or it even might have even a factory, which is like running a lot of robotics for manufacturing and all that in there, or it may be oil and gas kind of processing or drilling companies. you do want to separate out your infrastructure IT side from the ICS side, which you can have IoT, OT, and all that in there. But at the same time, now these solutions are not going to be the similar solution, because on one side, you have to understand the behavior into, because when you're dealing with the machines have their behaviors, which are much different those than you have the behavior coming from the human side. And if you have done it right, your ICS security will be much more better than what you can do on the other side. But definitely it is a critical that your machine learning and AI can be highly effective on the OT part of the infrastructures, critical infrastructure part of the structure there. But at the same time, if you don't extract right set of the features from the data set which are being produced, the activities which are happening on that part of the infrastructures, and those features are not being tracked properly, then you are going to miss it. So we were talking about the Stuxnet. If you look into that attack, went for multiple years. In the beginning, they were doing it into the slow kind of like progressions and all that to just destroy those centrifuge. But then they accelerated and then they wanted to send the message. But the thing is, if you had a proper solution in the place, that solution should be able to detect those. And the same thing should happen if you are in the power grid or you are water utilities. You just recently, there was an incident where that somebody was trying to put more chemical than needed into the water supply. And that if that has happened here in the US, especially in the Florida, that would have been a serious kind of incident where a lot of life could have been at the risk as well. So those attacks can be very serious, especially if you have a chemical factory or factories where you are processing those kind of the medicine or gases and all that. Any one of these breaches can create a significant amount of the challenge. And when you mentioned about, there was a discussion about that, in 21st centuries, the wars will not be physical. It might happen the wars are being conducted into the virtual domain, in the cyber domain. And that is pretty real. Those wars in the cyber domain, they cannot be only kind of like moving the financial, kind of like creating the financial damage substantially, but they can create a lot of like damage to the life and all that too, because as Sushobanji pointed out, all of these infrastructures are now connected to your cyber networks one way or other way. No matter how much air gap you do, there are some connections. And if those are not being monitored, they are not being tracked properly, you are going to have a breach, and that can have a life-threatening situation. Just like if somebody kind of gets hold of power grid, they can create a lot of like situational issues where life, as well as like you can have a lot of things like destroyed because you don't have like your the plants which are supposed to be keeping them into the fresh conditions. They can kind of like create a huge issue out there into your even food supply and water supply and all that in there. So I agree. And it's critical is like having a solution which is able to separate out your ICS infrastructures from the IT infrastructures. At the same time, your modeling about your machine learning and AI has to be kind of like put into the place. If you try to do all those things by manually and putting multiple products together to make a sense out of it, that you are still going to be struggling. The breaches will happen in there, and then you will not be able to detect. And if you look into the good example was Ukraine power utilities, not only had attack once, they had attack like 2 times, 3 times. And still they were not able to kind of come up and put the solution, because once again, they were just kind of taking a baby step at a time. And we do understand that, it's like some of the things which whether Ajay as well as Smith and Sushuvan had pointed out, that it is really critical to have like your real-time monitoring and detect the things into the early stages. If you are able to do that, and that should be the mantra going forward. If you are not able to monitor everything together in the real time and make that context and situation, if you don't have like the whole organizational context and situational awareness of what is happening, what was supposed to be happening, what I have seen happening in there, and pulling it all that together to make a decisions about if something is going abnormal, wrong, and taking actions on that, then you might be kind of finding the things which might be too late. And by that time, things might be already kind of like destroyed or down there, you know. With that, Sushovanji, I will let you ask the next set of the questions, you know.
Yeah, so before I go to Smith, I'll have a specific question to you, because I have seen in last day with one of our customer once where your tool was running. Logic was because many of us know there are a lot of industry benchmark tools in the market who has SIEM and SOAR is a different kind of a product altogether that has to be integrated. So your product is SIEM, SOAR, UBA, a lot of things integrated. Why you have thought of this way in an innovative approach? What was the reason behind it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we started in 2014, as you said, towards the end of 2014, what had happened is we had seen like many attacks at that time, whether it was a Target or JP Morgan or Home Depot or Sony. These are the company which spends hundreds of millions of dollars in their cybersecurity, because if you think about that, if any breach happened to them, it's very costly for them, and sometimes it runs into billions of dollars in the cost for them. And even those companies, things were getting breached and they did not know about it. Most of the time that news was coming from outside. And I had worked in the industry for like 20 plus years. And one of the things which was very clear, that the region people are missing out because some of those who have the resources, they have put too many tools in there, too many people's looking at it, and too many noise coming out of that. So they don't know what to do. And a lot of time people stop kind of like taking actions on the things coming out from there. And if that was for the big guys, but think about that, where the small companies as well, they need this continuous real-time monitoring, detections, and stopping of the threat. And they didn't had kind of that tool capabilities or people or resources they can go and have those. So what we decided is that we understood the problem, and we understood this problem is a pretty big problem, whether you are the biggest organization or you are the smallest organization in the industry. And this problem is going to become much more bigger and bigger as time passes out. And that's what we are seeing right now. If you see all this ransomware attack, how they have evolved into that. And now any small company to the big company, previously it was mostly you are going after the bigger organization, but now the tool has been automated. It's cheaper for the attacker side to go and buy the tool and start attacking into even the smaller organization. They always then have to go to the bigger organizations as well. And the more attacks are going to be. If you look into the ransomware attack, is definitely there was a kind of some stats last couple of days came out that between 2019 and 2020, there was 3x the increase. And then if you look into like 2021 to 2022, 23, we are going to see almost like 5x the increase going forward. And the reason is very simple, because does not cost a lot to get those tools set to start attacking and making a money, because there is an industry on the other side that people want to make money as well. So when we made a decision, we knew that, there's something is going to be happening and everybody needs this solution. But it was very critical for us to create a solution which is going to make it effective, not only for the biggest of the companies, but even for the smallest, and they can afford to have it. So in our solution, we from the get-go, we decided that, it's not going to be another SIM, which is much more better than the previous SIM. What we wanted to do is we wanted to come with a solution which is going to offer comprehensive cybersecurity for digital era. That is what we started with. And then if you look into to do that, what it required us to have like a platform which has a functionality from everything you needed from the same, but it has to be in the real time. Plus you have a SOAR, you have embed, you have like your ideas functionality. You also end up having is like your ML and AI to bring the context and situational awareness, because if we don't have that, then the small organization can never afford to have it because it will be extremely costly in there. One thing which Ajay has pointed out, if you look into in the cybersecurity, it is really critical that you have a 3 leg of cybersecurity and they all have to work together. So you got your people, process, and technology. The technology, you want to have the best of the best technology, which is kind of like giving you meaningful, actionable intelligence to take actions. But those actions are going to come from the people. And then the process has to be in a place that, it's like you have to make sure you follow those processes. It does not have to be that you have one person doing another thing and then the other person comes in and say, okay, I don't want to do that things and all that in there. If you don't have a proper processes well defined, and then you have a right set of the people, and people, that's not only those who are running the tools, but what we mean by the people is like all the way from the management to the people who are implementing, running the tool. Because at the end, what Ajay pointed out is the business is what you care about. And the whole thing about this digital era cybersecurity, we are talking about comprehensive cybersecurity, is to make those businesses be more efficient, be protected, so they focus on their real core business instead of worrying about always that what is going to happen in my organization. If the breach happen, I will get out of the business, as it was discussed by Paroma in the beginning, because you don't want to be in those situations, because 60% of the organization, if you are a smaller ones, you get a breach, you are out of the business. And that's what we did. We did from the day one that we want to have a platform which protect all the way smaller companies, which the price point they can afford, to the biggest company with the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in the organization. And that's what we did from the get-go.
Thank you. A lot of interesting questions are provoking my mind, but I'll come back to you. So before I go one more round with them, because time is also short, but so I'll come back to you with a lot of other questions. So now I'll come to Smith. So Smith, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So now I'll come to a specific question, because you keep on hearing a lot of things in the kind of blind spots in your infrastructure. So what is that, and how we can identify blind spot in our infrastructure? What do you think?
Sure. So as we all know, as rightly pointed by Chandra sir, that if you are able to identify some critical gaps in the infrastructure at the early age, you can prevent an attack from happening. For an example, why do we have a watchman at our doorstep who can protect, who can defend, and we also have given him a gun? So, so if there is a situation, he will act on them. Simple. Similarly, the point is, where exactly is this watchman sitting? This watchman is residing besides the gate of the premise of the building, which means that that particular area or that particular spot is critical. Now, when you talk about blind spot, these blind spots in virtual environment are pretty different, are particularly based on certain external and internal endpoints, particularly where there is a chance of vulnerability through which an attacker can get in. Which means today organizations have different products integrated with giving intelligence, with preventing an attack to be happening. But then to we every day when we see the news, maybe Hacker News, GB Hackers, and so platform, when we go ahead and we see on Twitter that there is a cyber incident. After a lot amount of security guidelines, you saw the Florida water incident, you saw solar winds, you saw different incidents happening all around the globe. So the reason is not that they are not implemented security, but they were not having the capability to identify the specific blind spot and to prevent and to protect, prevent, defend that blind spot. So where exactly can be this blind spot and how it can be weaponized? Giving a realistic overview, let me explain in such a way. Imagine you connect to a infrastructure via a VPN to a Windows 10 system via an RDP. Through getting, first you get connected to VPN, then you get RDP, and you connect it to the desktop. And when you connect to the desktop, you see there is some critical information of the users. So what the attacker does is he tries to copy paste that information out from the system towards the RDP. He is not able to do it. But when he just copies the information text, he is able to copy the text. So in certain scenarios, he's able to copy certain scenarios. He's able to copy your internal files converted into text into your system, and that is working. And in another scenario, maybe there is there are certain applications which are whitelisted services. Some services like your Discord server, your Hive, Telegram have been whitelisted onto the firewall, where the firewall has not blacklisted the social media sites. And when that access is being given, the attacker is able to see that the access is being granted particularly on that particular system, so that he can transfer all the files that are there on that system through the Discord application, and externally the attacker can exfiltrate and infiltrate files. Another scenario is the same time there is an custom applications which don't need to be compiled and rooted. They just need one-time execution policy. And that one-time execution policy is being defined in your guest users. Just an example can be your AnyDesk script. You can run AnyDesk in guest particularly. So there are certain files, command and controls written into one-click based solutions as well. And when this malwares execute, the way the communication they establish is through these whitelisted or which haven't been in the radar of firewalls. And then they're able to exfiltrate files outside. So you see it acts as a command and control. Now you might have observed Smith gave an overview of different small sort of things that were possible. Now this exactly are those blind spots particularly. I'm sure organization use golden images particularly. They harden it. But there are these small basic blind spots which are left open. And when there is a weaponization happens of an exploit, of a particular vulnerability, it particularly ensures that entire exploit is being weaponized with multiple pointers through which it would be getting in. And then when you get in, you have your network shares which are open, user shares which are open in the infrastructure. Imagine the data that it can take, the way it can execute on one particular system to maintain persistence. Then he can have the lateral movement, can go ahead, get the PowerShell access, do some reconnaissance, try to get the domain controller access, and then boom, can push certain policies, applications, get an SSO. So these are certain problems that enterprises are facing today. And these are certain blind spots which we are particularly talking about. And in order to identify this blind spot, it is very, very important that organizations tend to have certain sort of assessments like post-breach scenario assessment, configuration review for data loss, data theft, social engineering drills assessment to test your humans. Humans are the most weakest element. If someone offers a employee a better job and he tells him that you just tell us what were the organization you were working in, what clients you were working, what data you were exposed to, in a professional manner, there is a chance he would be leaking it. So that is also your blind spot, humans. So in social engineering, all this applies. There are no limits there, and the attackers will be using all the unethical means. It's very important for us that we use professional ethics and use critical, we ensure that different sort of attacks have been mapped, identified based on MITRE and NIST frameworks particularly. So this is what I had to share.
Okay. So Smith, so this is a problem statement. There will be a blind spot and other things. So what is the solution? So VAPT and those kind of things will help, for the enterprises to mitigate this kind of things?
Well, VAPT will act as a solution to identify such spots. So firstly, the problem is blind spots. No one knows where exactly are these blind spots. They can be in your configuration file of your router, where there can be allowing outbound traffic, particularly allowing outbound traffic, and the ports are not filtered. So these blind spots can be in your infrastructure. VAPT will help you to identify where exactly are these blind spots and what are the remediations. What is the proof of concept to identify these blind spots? How to patch this blind spot? What impact it has towards that enterprise? Now, this is very important, which I will like to give a compliment to my team particularly, and the strategy that we particularly are evolving. I see when VAPT is being done, and as rightly pointed by Ajay sir, I was able to see that sir made a very important point that today organizations have a very different mindset, that is their business is on the topmost priority, which is entirely true. For us as well, whenever we are working on different assessment, we should be able to talk the technology, talk the business language and the strategical language. And if we are not able to talk the business language, maximum of these assessment and engagements are getting failed. So it is very important that we assess their business. If I'm having too much of security and the business is not able to scale, maybe I'm not doing my job fair. Simple as that. So it is very, very important that we ensure the 2-3 things particularly. That we are able to identify the business processes particularly, and the parameters that we are able to define, the recommendation, patch management controls that we are able to define are aligned with your business process. So when you share an impact altogether in your VAPT report, you should have a business-based impact. What exactly is it? A reputational risk? Is it a financial risk? Is it a data theft risk particularly? So all these pointers, calculated analysis should be done on the security reports that you do. So whether it's BCP, whether it's VAPT, everywhere you need to ensure that you have a mindset and an angle of that enterprise. And that's the reason walkthrough meetings are very important. Whenever there is an engagement with customer, ensure that there is a walkthrough meeting that is being defined where you are able to understand their business goals and loopholes, where you are able to understand the regulatory barriers, and all this information you can integrate and correlate with the existing security gap that you have identified and its wider impact, so that the customer is able to take the decision in order to ensure that the business is getting flowing. Same time, the certification that they are maintaining, for example, your PCI DSS, your ISO 27013. All needs to be aligned with the business, and for that you need to ensure that all these parameters are included in your report. So this is what I will like to share particularly.
Okay, Smith. So before I go to Ajay ji, I need a one-liner answer. Like as you said, VAPT is important, but people are confused in the audience. Whom should they go? Because there are too many players. A lot of players are offering in a lowest possible cost, because people are always looking at best service at lowest cost. So what are the kind of parameters? Do you think like SART and this kind of empaneled agencies, or maybe some governance of the NIST, or maybe OSWAS, you said, SANS top 20 kind of framework, how do they analyze who is their right partner to execute those kind of tasks?
Very important question raised by you. My one-liner answer would be, enterprise should ensure that whichever vendor that you are enlisting in is a certain empaneled authority or a certain empaneled vendor. And second, on top of it, you should have an evaluation criteria. That means you need to evaluate the report of the particular agency. What are their past reports, that the sample reports that they have worked in? If you're going to do a web application pen test, ensure that you're reviewing the reports. You're seeing the quality of reproducing or vulnerabilities that they're doing. There can be customers, there can be people who will come in and picture that, look, there is they will be giving you a VAPT for peanuts of prices, but it would be just a simple scanning script they will be running and giving you a one-pager report. Is it enough? No. You need to get a realistic view with the step to reproduce, with the detailed evidences, with impact recommendation, so that you have time to act. And second point, most importantly, is the consulting firm has the responsibility to explain, elaborate the attack that they have discovered, and tell you how to mitigate it, and help you, be with you for your entire cyber security journey of the particular application until it is resilient towards a cyber attack and the vulnerabilities that are discovered. If these are the evaluation criteria for getting a vendor, it is easy to get a cheap vendor. but it is really hard to get a vendor who is with you for ensuring the accountability, responsibility, assurance, confidentiality, and integrity. This is what I will like to say.
All right, Smith. So now I need to go to Ajay ji. So Ajay ji, as you can understand, we are all talking about threats, mitigation strategies, proactive defense. So everything is in and around data. So we are all concerned to protect our data, and in that context, you can see globally lot of buzz like data protection, privacy, lot of different kind of laws, regulations like GDPR, CCPA, and other kind of things. So what do you think? That kind of laws, the compliances to those kind of laws will be helpful for the organization, not in terms of only compliance, but also the goodwill, reputation, trust, and other things. So what is your take on that? Ajay ji, are you there? I found you are muted.
Sorry, my apologies. I was speaking, not realizing. Do I have your permission to make a small, brief presentation?
Yeah, small, maybe small presentation,
Yeah.
definitely. You can do
Couple
that.
of slides to
Yeah,
drive
sure.
home the answer to your question
Yeah,
and
yeah,
reinforce
absolutely.
what I said earlier. Just give me a
So that
minute.
is the
I'll be
idea,
there.
actually, not to put jargons, make it meaningful to the audience so that they can understand and implement in their life.
Very simple English, which I will say
Hmm.
here. Slideshow. Yeah, there we go. The endless war, build your cyber defense. How do we do that? Everyone today is saying security and privacy needs to be a business process. Like I also said, believe you me, in my 2 decades of working in this domain, it's more to do with, I think, intent, implementation in the large number of organizations. And my suspicion is it's the proportion is very high. Pandey sir, with his experience, can share his insight. But my personal opinion, based on hundreds of encounters with top people, is that this is just a good intention. And the whole today, if you look at this particular slide, there are multiple layers of security that can talk of. Now, how do we do all this? Security, privacy, all of these are millions of things are happening. How does a company manage all of this? On top of that, that's why I keep saying the beauty of a management system is this: planning, doing, checking, and improving. So it helps any organization. And this is a standard structure called all ISO standards, of which this is, we were consulting to a company in US, and then they had a strategy consulting company on balance scorecard, automated, and when we talked, they think that the annexure A of the standard is this is a management system. Understand your business, define what your leadership, define policies, plan to actions to address risk and opportunities. And this, believe you me, I'm just going to the next slide, which talks of privacy. This framework applies across quality, privacy, security, operational planning. It's a brilliant framework as far as because we have all seen millions of frameworks. But what is the engine for an organization to build its cyber defense? Basic fundamentals like this. And I was talking to this CTO, on his board the other day when I walked into his room. He'd just taken over this company, CTO cum CISO, which itself is a conflict of interest. And he had millions of programs, projects, this, that, the buzzwords that we've all been talking of. I said, believe you me, you just have to use this particular framework to plug into this. Otherwise, these will all be pieces of paper. Any initiative in security, technology or not technology, can be used in this framework, and we tend to divulge. This is the engine, to my mind, one of the best operating frameworks available today. And why this is not so successful? Because in my experience, security, privacy is focused here. Very rarely do people talk of the process, the people, and the strategy layer. It is virtually non-existent and at best ad hoc. So a holistic approach, who needs to know what? CEO level, board C level, departmental managers, all of this. We need to actually in our approach develop a comprehensive program for security and data privacy, which to my mind says business needs first, technology needs last. And this privacy compliance framework, which is ISO 27701 now, earlier it was British Standard 10002, this is nothing else but a box of planning, doing, checking, and improving. Like this, what they call personal information sale. Now, please understand, you have mentioned a law like GDPR, which has been post 2018 become let's say a drive of privacy. But the world that we are living in, please understand, unlike an ISO standard, which is like this, you have an option. Here it's a binary. So any legal law, either you are compliant or non-compliant. It's a 0-1 sum game, and the penalties are very, very large. So to address your question, how privacy and how can be improved? Laws, yes, but they are a deterrent. I mean, the Data Privacy Act in India, which is supposed to happen whenever it happens, and the draft ones we have seen, it's all scary in terms of jail fines, all kinds of fines. But will they actually, the whole controversy today about WhatsApp privacy rules, these are all issues and challenges that we need to grapple with, and organizations have to do that. And like Pandey sir was pointing out, today the hacker is at a huge advantage. He has very sophisticated tools available for free. Organizations have to invest serious dollars and to make things real, to become compliant. Because and to what do they comply to? There's GDPR, there's CCPA, there is Singapore, there's Australia. Each country has its own privacy regulations. Uganda, for example, has a very detailed privacy regulation. Now, how do we any company, and we are talking of cyber security, the cyber. Now, privacy, the world which we are living in is actually cyber. It's a digital and physical interaction world. The cyberspace is become a football field for all kinds of players, the good and the bad. And the worst is not the good and the bad, but the ignorant. And a lot of people in this level, as I keep saying, the board level, the C-level individuals, they are actually blissfully ignorant of all of this. So and the field is being dominated by IT and technology people. Unfortunate. Then here it's legal managers in the privacy space. But please understand, unless we have this part right, the strategy part, there will always be how do I say, a serious concern. Because if a company, that very famous thing which was there in Alice in Wonderland, if I don't know what I wanted, where do I want to go, then any road is fine. So, and organizations today are grappling with a plethora of issues, multiple, challenges. They need to think it through, which is very easy for me to say. But when you're running a large enterprise, then this becomes absolutely clear. What do I do? Where do I apply? And that thinking has to come right from the very top. Unfortunately, the board level, though they are aware of the importance of it theoretically and how it can, impact their business, they need serious help, and not from technology people. They need help from strategy people. Like I still can't get over what this business owner said. My technology people are happy playing with the tools. They are not have any clue of what my business is. So that's a real indictment. And I am equally guilty of that. in terms of technical layers. That's what I'm saying. So to my mind, whatever you might say, sir, I'm a great personal believer in the last 2 decades of the power of this particular framework. It does not decry or demean any of the technical aspects, but we have to combine this to have a more proactive approach to manage the millions and zillions of threats that we face by using just these 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I hope I have made a point. So Shobhan, and does it help?
Yeah, it helps. Or maybe if I have understood correctly, so if I reframe for the audience understanding, so you are suggesting if some organization and enterprise go for implementation and benchmarking for the ISO 27701 standard, so GDPR, CCPA, PDP, whatever kind of law, wherever it is in multiple countries, it will be easier for them to comply with those laws, unified approach.
Absolutely. And I think, people are looking at certifications. Believe you me, there are under the law, especially in the GDPR one, no one, the EU board has not sanctioned any certification body. They have a provision for certification. So there's no recognized certification available. So people are doing all kinds of nonsense, seal of compliance, this and that. But either you are compliant to the, and believe me, data in today's world, we all know is unstructured. So when we talk of data privacy, it becomes a nightmare.
Right. So thank you, Ajayji. So taking cue from this only, I'll again go to Mr. Pandey because we talked about now ISO 27000, even 27701. We talked about PCI DSS, SOC 2. Even Smith talked about vulnerability assessment and other things. So is there a possibility, because you said also PPT, my people process tools. In your tool, kind of a Seceon kind of platform, do have the provisions to manage those compliances and those things in your platform as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, see, any of those compliances you have, there are certain things you have to do with the technology. And those ones definitely, whether it is NIST, whether it's PCI DSS, now in the US, there is something called CMMC, and then GDPR, as well as the HIPAA, and all those are there. And then will be also one of the things what we wanted to do is, because the compliance is a pretty taxing job for the most of the people out there. So what we had done is we have created a tool which we call is a deep tracker, and made it very easy that even if there is a new standard is coming up in there, that can be easily implemented on the spot, and then you can always keep on like checking for it and also running the reports on the schedule without a human involvement in there, and you can see what are the things are in the violations and all that. So that's something we did. But at the same time, one thing I want to make sure the point get across, because any of those compliance you cannot just do with the technology, because some technology will do 70-80% of them, and but there is also processes involved, and there are some manual kind of things are involved where the people have to kind of like communicate between each other and all that in there. But definitely from the get-go, we wanted to make sure, because our platform had all the data sets. So remember that something Smith talked about is like, okay, you have this MITRE ATT&CK framework. So you have all the techniques and tactics. So all those mapping what is happening and across, not only about the whole organization, but on the individual, how the things are progressing. You want to kind of know about it and understand that in there. So putting all those things, once you have a platform with the bigger context and situational awareness of whole organization, it becomes very easy to do. And what we did is we made it pretty much available to the user of the platform as well. So we can put any standard, but even if you have a new standard come in, you can just kind of go ahead and save the queries in there. It's just so easy to kind of call those and save it. And then you have your own reports coming out individually in there. So you don't have to worry about looking at another 10,000 reports. You look into your 10, which you care about. Okay.
Pandey, sir, if I may interrupt you, this is a fascinating insight, and we will catch up later on this one, because if a tool as powerful as this can be created, like you said, the wider context and the lower level detail, it will make very, very meaningful benefits for any enterprise.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So maybe one supplementary question before I go to Smith. I have seen you also have a XDR kind of platform also. Though with third-party endpoint agents, definitely you can monitor and manage. So why you have also introduced your own XDR kind of a platform? Any specific thought process behind that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So if you look into the way the industry approach has been, is like, it's like different silos in there. So if you look into, if I just have a EDR kind of a product, with EDR, you are just only watching that particular endpoints. You don't have the whole organizational context. Any of those things when you are talking about, when we are looking into our platform, when we call it XDR, this is not like a somebody's industry where people are taking a SIM platform separate ideas platform, separate endpoint, and then sometimes they have like network detections and response, or sometimes they don't have it. But with those ones, once again, you are trying to pull together, but those tools are speaking their own languages in there, and you are never able to pull all the contexts and situations. And what we did is, when we started, because we work with all those endpoints, you can think about any endpoint, EDR or AV and all that. We work with all of them. And then we started seeing what kind of contributions they are doing to the bigger pictures. And we saw that they have a very minute view of the things in there. They go and create environments, and then most of the time they miss out the things which are even what is kind of like happening from those endpoints across the network as well. So that was the driving force. A couple of years back, we kind of said, like, we have to go in and address this problem, because when we are talking about the comprehensive cybersecurity, this leg of the solution has to be put into the platform. And one of the things we also decided, because look, no matter how best the EDR if you don't have the whole organizational context, you are going to be always running into those situations. So what we decided, and this was a hard decision for me to make, that our EDR is going to be always part of the complete solution, what we call is XDR. So in the XDR, you always have the EDR. We are not going to sell standalone, because once again, anybody's EDR, you can take it in there. They are never going to have whole organizational context. If you ask what are the things are running in the whole organizations, who are interacting with whom, how much they are interacting, when they started, when they end, you cannot get all that data into a single context for them to see any kind of those lateral movements, propagations, and collection of those data and all that. So that's what we decided. And just to give you an idea, one thing I wanted to share with you guys, because this is definitely a cybersecurity, we are talking about it. In any one of these breach, whether you had this sandburst or the latest one was with the exchange, we have more than 4,000 customers who use our platform, and not a single one, even those with the Orion or those with the exchange, got kind of like where they had any kind of like threats which propagated. We detected those into the early stage whenever that people were trying to kind of go in and exploit those, and then we closed the door. And one of the things is our partners very proudly talk about it, that, hey, how the platform, because of the context and situations, and able to pull all of those things together, is why it's able to proactively detect it, which is very critical in there. And it comes with a lot of cost. I'll tell you one thing, the cost in the sense is for us, not for the in kind of users, end user, we have pulled it all together. But from our point of view, if you look into the industry, why there are not a lot of solutions like that? Because it takes, like it has taken us so many years and endless like work. Like most of my team will be working anywhere from 12 to like 15 hours, and they were passionate about it because they don't work just like, hey, I have to work, or I'm going to ask them to work, but they are passionate about that we are solving a real problem. And we make our team actually directly interact with our customers and partners. So they hear from them that, hey, how this thing is helping them, why they have not seen anything like that in there. And the reason is because our kind of platform, nobody wants to do it. And the reason is because it's a lot of work. And then same time, if you do a feature company, if you do a silo product, you can get sold, you can make billions of dollars, and then you are out to do something else in there. And our goal was not to just do that. Our goal is to like, hey, create something which is going to help everybody. And then the good things will happen to all the people in the ecosystem. You don't want to just kind of have a quick hit and run out there, So that's what we are building out there. Thanks, Sushovan, for asking that question. Thank you so
Sure.
much.
Thank you. So I'll come to Smith for a quick comment, then I'll take certain questions because already we are very late, because I have seen more than 45 minutes panel. People are always become little impatient. So Smith, last quick question before I take the question from the audience. All of us already discussed about lot of problems, lot of attacks and all. So, but from audience side, from audience point of view, I would like to ask a hacker, like from a hacker's mindset, what do you think? What are the critical attacks at this moment persistent for the enterprises? Which are the critical attacks?
Sure. So a very important question you have asked. So the major attacks that I see enterprises are getting targeted is, number one is your emails. So emails are the first areas where our organizations would be looking up, or the hackers will be looking at for targeting you for spear phishing attacks. So what are they interested? They are interested to do, they're interested in gaining access of your email accounts to see what all communications you are doing. Second is to get the access of your systems. How are they going to do it? There are macro-based exploits that are available, office-based macro exploits that they are going to target you through email. So email attacks are number one. Number two is ransomware attack. So if you ask me, the biggest challenge that all these CISOs or the industry that is facing today is the ransomware attacks. And trust me, the way right now ransomwares are working are on a very different level. Earlier time, it was an automated ransomware that was proliferating inside the infrastructure and demanding for ransom. But now let me tell you, we have been seeing ransomware samples where there is an external command and control initiated, and there is a penetration testing that is happening on the infrastructure of organization, through which the ransomware is able to proliferate the spread. So he is going, reckoning, identifying vulnerability, exploiting it, gaining privilege, conducting privilege escalation, being the administrator, gaining the Active Directory access, and flooding the infrastructure nodes via pushing a group policy particularly. And this is a very important attack that is happening. Second is data theft. Data theft is at high risk. Today, enterprise have got such a tons of data that is exposed publicly, which they aren't aware of. And this data, for an example, you see there are open source through techniques like open source intelligence. You can identify public facing ICDS and SCADA endpoints where you can get the control of SCADA components. You can get access to electrical grids. You can get access to chemical companies. From one chemical load balancer, you can transfer it to another unit. This sort of vulnerabilities are available openly, and these public access point needs to be identified and mapped. So enterprise should be focusing on all this, and certainly for doing all this sort of identifying all this sort of vulnerabilities on this attacks, particularly detecting all these attacks on infrastructure. It is very important that enterprise take impaneled companies who have been governmentally recognized particularly. So organization needs to have companies, organization needs to onboard companies who are certain impaneled. someone like Prime Info, sir, where the government, where they have got a government acceleration, and one who is with you particularly throughout your journey for ensuring that the security is taken up.
No, so one of the person from the audience, he has asked, is red teaming exercise worth doing if red teamers cannot do full-fledged attack? What will be answer to this?
Sure. So this is a very good question that has been asked. So will it be necessary that a full-fledged attack needs to be taken up when there is a red teaming scenario? So the answer to the question is very simple. Whenever there is a red teaming activity that is done, before that you have a customer discussion round. And in the customer discussion round, customer is able to dictate his terms. What are his expectations? That that the particular areas that he want to know, or the threats would be particularly, or the access that he particular wants it. In the entire engagement, the attacker should ensure that all sort of weapons, all sort of communication tools are being utilized in order to ensure that that particular area is targeted and we are able to get the access. And if the access is not being getting onto the topmost objective, then what were the phase through which the attack was, or what were the areas maximum that the attacker was able to go in? All those needs to be captured, and a detailed report needs to be presented along with the ways and mechanisms of how the attacker's methodology was, what tools he was equipped with, what scripts he ran, and what were the particular vulnerabilities which he was able to exploit and infiltrate in particularly.
Okay. There is one more interesting question. Maybe I can ask you also, but maybe I'll ask Ajay ji on that, because this is having little culture.
I will also like to value add on this. I will also like to value add on this particularly.
No problem. So someone asked, like, as you have said, there are a lot of blind spots and all, but however, organizations have a very arrogant attitude in recognizing that there can be blind spot when currently there are no pain areas. How we can convince them? So maybe let us take first Ajay ji's view, then maybe I can take your views also.
Sure.
Ajay ji?
Sure.
So Shobhan, I would, not say arrogant. When you're saying blind spot and arrogance, I do not know. I would rather use the word ignorant. From ignorant about blind spot, unless he has some he or she has some particular experience in mind, by and large people...
No, so I'll reframe that question. I think what she has tried to say, the customers are having always mindset, everything is safe at my side, there is no problem. Unless they have certain issues, they are never convinced to carry out anything. Let it be VAPT, let it be ISO 27000, whatever. I think she is trying to point on that cultural side of it. How we can build that cyber culture, information security culture to the organizations.
Education, educate the board, the senior management about what are the risks in a line.
Okay. Awareness sessions like this also.
No, I don't think so. It's a... See, in my experience, I have been trying, and one of my dreams is, before I die, write a simple book which is available on the aircraft bookstalls, where a CEO looks at the title, picks it up, and during the flight he finishes it and gets shit scared and keeps coming, back to his team. But it's easier said than done. Most people are aware, and then when it comes to the devil is in the detailing. And in our kind of business and domain, like Pandey sir was saying, and I'm really happy, because when he said, I have not seen the tool or the possibilities, if he says, you can create the context and go right to the bottom detail, it will be a great experience, for me at least.
Sure. Smith, you want to add anything to how to build this culture to the organization? Because no one wants to do it unless problems.
Right. Well, what I have been able to identify and what I am able to see is, to be honest, I will give maybe I would be having a contrary answer to this, but the organizations who don't have the cybersecurity mindset or are very arrogant in terms of implementing a change of implementing cybersecurity in their infrastructure, just don't approach them. Just they are not your customer base, as simple as that. Even though you sell them a VAPT and the activity that they need to do, they are not able to do it, and they and the kind of proportionality that you're putting on them, at the end of the year, financial year, you see that out of your 100% energy, you're putting 80% of your energy, and in order to make that 100%, in order to get that 100%, rather than have certain it's pretty, means my experiences, it's pretty good, amazing to work with enterprise who have a security culture, who have the security culture practice, where you need to spend 40% of your time for ensuring that you give your 100%. So in such scenarios, there is time when you need to kick such clients particularly. This is an honest answer that I may give, and it might be contradictory to few of them. But particularly the companies who are who are in the maturity stage of a L1 particularly, where they are on level 1 particularly, for them to be in levels 5, 6, 7, 8, it's going to take time. And it would be based on the regulatory barriers that they would have to do it. And second is, there would be incidents like ransomware and all, when they would be getting those goosebumps in order to get that activity, in order to be cyber conscious particularly.
All right, so I'll add one more lines to that. Like definitely, because till the time everyone in the enterprise will think VABT or 27,000 whatever, it's part of their compliance, they are not understanding it is adding values to their business. This mindset will continue. So it is about all of us who are in the cybersecurity community to make them understand how it can add values to their business. So then only this kind of arrogance, ignorance, whatever we say, that can go. So maybe before I go to Mr. Pandey for the last question, if from the audience, if you have any other questions, you can raise hand, because we are in the concluding part of it. You can raise your hand, or once I finish this question, you can also unmute and shoot your queries. So this was also a query from the audience to Mr. Pandey. This question can be directed. They said, recently FireEye stated that there was a cybersecurity breach. It is iconic that cybersecurity enabler themselves got hacked. How can a cybersecurity organization themselves ensure that such breaches do not happen? So maybe Mr. Pandey, you can.
That's a great question. You see, for any organization, first, if you are a cybersecurity company and you are built upon detection is what is like you are named for, it is really critical to eat your own dog food. If you are not kind of having your own solution deployed and that is not detecting the threats, then there is something wrong in there. So it's really critical that any organization, cybersecurity is those who are kind of like going and saying that I offer the best cybersecurity solution. It is critical that you have a solution deployed yourself and it is running optimally. Another thing also have to be happening is you have to be monitoring one thing is like you have deployed the solution and then you are also taking the actions, whatever has to be done, that's automatically a push button, but there are people who have to be responsible behind it. You don't want to find out a threat or you learn about the exposure when it is already in the public out there. You don't want to be in those situations. So it's a really critical for any organizations to have those hygienes and those continuous real-time monitoring detections, as well as stopping or remediation, whatever you want to call it. That is a critical. But if you are a cybersecurity organization, that comes with even greater responsibility that, hey, you are got to eat your own dog food and make sure that dog food is something which you are trying to give it to the others. If it has a better efficacy, efficiency, and the people are going to see some ROI on that investment they are going to do on your platform or your product.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we are in the concluding note. So I don't find any more questions from the audience. They have not raised hand also. So maybe one liner from each of you, maybe starting with Ajay ji. So maybe one quick liner as a concluding remarks. Anything you want to put for the audience benefit?
I would just say one thing, that this war of endless will always remain, and we need to be very, very proactive in our approach. keep the big picture always in mind and not get lost in the details. For any organization, you know. So details are important. The devil is in the detail. But yes, the business context comes from the big picture.
Right. So maybe Smith, any quick one-liner concluding remarks for the audience benefit? Any
Sure.
suggestion?
Ensure that business understanding of the corporate of the enterprise is also being handed over to the resources that are working with you for the activity. Let them also understand what business value they can value add through the vulnerability that they are reporting, so that the standards would be increased particularly.
Okay. So Mr. Pandey, any quick concluding notes?
Yeah, it's like for my kind of suggestion to any organizations we work with is that cybersecurity is just something you should see as a kind of like an enabler of your business to do better and be efficient and all that in there, because cybersecurity is not about just like an expense. It is just something, it can be a differentiator for you as well, because cybersecurity is not only watching for the threats, but it can find a lot of inefficiency in your organizations as well. And that helps you kind of like focus on your business and grow significantly if you have a right set of the solutions in the place. So always look for that. If you're looking for a cybersecurity solution, look for that. Does it offer me the best efficiency, and an ROI? And look it just not from that particular solution point of view, but from your organization point of view, because that is very critical for any organization, whether it's a small or big.
Right. Wonderful. So I think we have heard a lot of interesting and different things as everyone is talking about proactive defense, and Mr. Pandey right now said cybersecurity proposition, let it be solution, products, or maybe services, it should not be treated as a cost. It should be treated as a business enabler to us. And more precisely, as all of us are saying, cybersecurity is never a destination. So it is a kind of continuous journey. We need to evolve, we need to understand, we need to uplift ourselves. As all of us said, there should be synergy, harmony between people, process, and tools, because people like us, whomsoever is available present here, we are all running the organizations. So we have to have our wisdom applied to our enterprise, then only it will be meaningful for our enterprise as well. So in spite of all those problems, all those scary things, lot of breaches and all, so let us end our discussion in a positive note. So there will be problems, but solutions are also with us only. So if the human firewalls can be uplifted, so I'll try to conclude with the line of the story from Dickens. As he said, there will be always good times and bad times. So it is about us, how we can implement, how we can take the positives and implement in our enterprise and our life, or maybe in our journey. It will be definitely meaningful for the industry, for our community, for our ecosystem. So I think that's all. So with this, I would like to thank all our panelists, our eminent speakers, our audience. So anyone from the audience, if you want to speak something, so you can also do that. Otherwise, we are going to conclude here. Thank you for your patience. We are more than 1.5 hours we are discussing on this. So thank you for your great participation.
Thank you, Sushovan, for giving us the opportunity. And I love that word, human firewall.
Yeah. So that is the objective of this today's program. So if we can uplift our wisdom, and at least from today's session, and audiences can apply at least one learning to their enterprises, then only we can think this webinar, this kind of discussions are meaningful. That is our objective, to spread more and more awareness and give the insights so that they can at least get some takeaways from this kind of sessions.
Thanks a lot, Sushobham sir. It was an amazing moderation done by you, and thanks to the entire panelists, the way we were able to articulate, and the audience for listening us particularly. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all of you. Thank you Vijay ji. Thank you Smith. Thank you Mr. Pandey, and thank you all the audience for your patience.